Welcome back to part two. How many people were here for part one yesterday? Okay, good. And there's some new people. Well, let me just start off with prayer and we will begin. Father Yah, we just come into your presence and ask you to just fill this room with your Ruach HaKodesh and speak through me, help me to stay on track and in time and just be coherent so people understand what we're really talking about. Open up the minds, the ears, the eyes, the spiritual senses of all of us to have the discernment and understand exactly what the Aleph Tav body system is. Just put your words in my mouth and open up our hearts and minds to you and your truth in Yeshua's name. All right, so part two of the Aleph Tav body. So I call this restoring the Hebrew bioenergetic temple. So of course we're talking about the human body. And this is all about discovering the language of Yah on the body. And I have a little definition here to start with. That is the Aleph Tav body system is a Hebrew electromagnetic telecommunication system of the body. And this system is made up of all the basic building blocks of creation, the Hebrew letters, which control all the information for proper function, shape, form, and animation of the human body. It's kind of a big definition. It's packed, but it's what it is. It's not complete because I could say, what is the Aleph Tav body? Well, what is it not? It's something that Yah created. It's part of his creation. So just like everything in his creation, we can study this probably for the rest of our lives and keep finding out more. And so it can be another witness to everything else that he created, because it's going to be in perfect unison with everything he created, because it's all from him and it's all based on the same principles, because he's consistent. There's so many levels to what the Aleph Tav body could be, but we're just going to go kind of through it from a bioenergetic perspective, and I'll bring in other little things here and there. Messes it up, but basically this is kind of a shape of a body. Don't worry, I don't have good graphics anyways, because I haven't gotten graphics from Michael Solomon yet. So these were pretty bad anyways, but this was a man standing here, front and back, and these little dots are where the points are. Except for a couple little lines here, because the image was so bad I had to kind of put breasts on, chest on the guy, because the image was actually so bad. And this is a chart of, you can't see it, but it looks like a schematic. But it was actually research on all the communication systems in the body. And it's only one slide of hundreds of thousands that would probably wallpaper this room of how they traced all the biochemical reactions in the body. But all those chemical reactions are controlled by a software system. So that's what we were speaking about yesterday. And for those who weren't here yesterday, just a brief overview. Maybe if this thing will work real quick. Right here. Ultimately, the breath of life from the Creator, light, force, movement, information, spirit, is what makes up the informational level of the body. It's the body's software, which is unseen. And that informational system of the body, which functions by electromagnetic communication, is what creates the software for running your chemistry and your cells and your tissues and your organs and everything else. So it all flows from the informational level, which flows from the breath of life and everything he has programmed our bodies to do. So that's kind of where we left off yesterday. So we get right into telecommunication systems, because we're talking about the information system of the body. So obviously telecommunication is the science and practice of transmitting information by electromagnetic means. And bioenergetic telecommunication systems is the same thing, but it happens in the human body. And it controls living systems, which is why our body is so susceptible to all the man-made stuff we make, because the body works exactly the same way. Why do you think they call them a cell phone? Cell phones, they got the idea from how the cells work. All of our technology is ultimately, whether Nikola Tesla or someone else developed it, they developed it because they studied the creation. What is it? It's a creationist understanding of Yah's design of the human body from a Hebraic energetic perspective. So, we have this passage in the beginning. In the beginning, Elohim created Aleph Tav, the heavens and the earth. That's really not exactly what it says, but you have Bereshit bara Elohim Aleph Tav ha Shemayim Vav Aleph Tav ha Haaretz. That's actually the order in Hebrew, and then when we get it translated, a lot of that doesn't even get translated. They don't translate either Aleph Tav, and one Aleph Tav is this Aleph Tav, and one Aleph Tav has a Vav Aleph Tav. So you have to ask the question, what are those? Because when you look them up, they don't even have a definition of what that word is. So it's like, okay, so these words are here. And that's why people get confused, because in Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, a lot of Jewish people, even in Hebrew roots, you see a lot of people believe that Hebrew is the basic building blocks of all creation. And it's like, well, where do they get that from? They get it from Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, Elohim created the Aleph Tav, the Hebrew language. And then the second Aleph Tav is Vav Aleph Tav. Well, that's speaking of the Aleph Tav in human flesh, because the Vav is 6, the number of man. It's the connector, the mediator. So it's mentioning the Word and the Word in flesh in the very first sentence of Genesis, which then actually matches John 1:1. So if we actually read it in the Hebrew, it's saying the same thing. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Yah, and the Word was Yah. It's right there. But there's a slight difference between the spoken word and the living word. But there it is, right there in Genesis 1. The very first thing he did create, and then he uses it to create everything else. It was the Hebrew language. And we could keep reading there, but we really don't need to, because that kind of serves a point. Yesterday I talked more about the light. But for everyone who remembers the video I played yesterday with the sound and how the vibrations of the sound affect physical matter, well, think about this here. The earth was formless and void, and there was darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Ruach HaKodesh was moving, vibrating, some versions say, over the faces of water. And then he said, let there be light. And as I showed yesterday, this word light isn't just light as we think of it. If you look at the etymological use of the word, it's more like maybe ether, which does contain light, but contains more than just light. I'll keep moving because we have a lot to go through. So what is a universe? What does that mean? It means a single verse, a single spoken sentence. Think about that. Question, who spoke? What language did he use? If Yah spoke forth everything and formed everything from what he spoke, we should start to see the fingerprints of Yah's language everywhere in creation. And we do. Brad Scott has some good work on this one called In My Flesh I See God. And he basically reveals how the language of Hebrew is found embedded in all of God's creation, in the structure of words, in agriculture, in biology, in our DNA, 2- and 3-letter roots, the life of the cell, chromosomes, atoms. He calls it the ergobiolinguistics, which is agriculture and biology, because a lot of our agriculture and biology words originally came from Hebrew words. So I just add to that the Hebrew building blocks of creation are agrobiomathematic language, because Hebrew is an energetic language, because numbers are the language of energy. Everything in physics gets numbered or can be measured either by waveform or by frequency. So that's numbers, mathematics. Now, mathematics doesn't always give you any detailed information on how something works. It just gives you a description or a measurement. But it can be measured. So a very important thing to do is not to compare Hebrew with any other language, because Hebrew letters are numbers and they're also pictures. It's not like any other language. It's unique. What is it not? Well, it's not Kabbalah. It's not mysticism. It's not New Age. It's not occult. Very important principle. HaSatan did not create anything. So let's talk about counterfeits for a minute. Principles of a counterfeit. First question. This thing is so picky. Have you ever seen a counterfeit $3 bill? No. Why not? You only counterfeit that which is real or true. Let that think in. Have you ever seen a counterfeit penny? Why not? You only counterfeit what is valuable. Does the counterfeit look similar? Even though it looks the same, is it the same? No. Truth and a lie look similar, but they are not the same. What does the anti-counterfeit study? They only study the real thing. If you study the real thing, you can always tell a lie. Why does HaSatan use counterfeits? Well, 2 reasons. Very important. Don't run away from the truth because of a counterfeit. I believe HaSatan uses counterfeits for 2 reasons. 1, to mislead those who believe the counterfeit. And 2nd, to keep others away from the truth out of fear. So whenever I see a counterfeit, I ask, what is HaSatan trying to hide from us? So instead of running away because of fear or whatever it is, fear is faith in reverse anyways, basically you were putting more faith in HaSatan and his lie than you are putting faith in believing the truth. And what's worse, you may actually be giving credit to HaSatan for what Yah made and designed. So you don't want to grieve the Ruach. There's a lot of counterfeits out there, but that's because he's copying the truth and corrupting it. Everything in the body is controlled by energy points and pathways. And these points are related to the Hebrew letters and biblical principles. So the body works based off of laws of both physics and mathematics. The body is our temple, and it works based off of all of Yah's laws. I would kind of call this the universal Torah, all of which he spoke and created. So the human temple excuse me, based on Hebrew energy points, are related to his word and his Torah. They are mathematical and function much like telecommunication systems in the body, sending messages throughout the body for proper manifestation and function of the human temple. Therefore, the meaning are similar to thematic interpretation, drawing a correlation between the meaning of a point and a biblical meaning. So I don't know how many people have used thematic interpretation before. I know Tony Robbins does a lot of that. It's really fascinating. But the body works the same way because everything is symbolic and but yet literal at the same time. Therefore, how we live is directly related to how each point functions, and thus how the temple will ultimately function. It is all built on a universal legal system that Yah created and put into effect. So think about this. Spiritual warfare is based on a legal system. Blessings and curses are based on a legal system. Ancient Near Eastern covenants are based on a legal system. Physics is based on a legal system. And your body, the temple, is based on a legal system. We just don't really know what it is. Where is... He's not in the room. Now the name... David. He's not in here. But how many people saw his testimony on a couple days ago? I wanted to bring him in here because he's like living proof of how the body physically changes as you change your beliefs and your lifestyle. You know, when he became a woman, he didn't have to go through any surgeries. He just took hormones and he's changed his way of thinking, and the body physically changed. And when he was redeemed, his body naturally started going back because that's how the body actually really works because of these points. Parts and all. The Torah is a legal system, but not just a biblical Torah, but all the instructions that Yah spoke when he created the world. So obviously some he has given us through his word, we call it Torah. Others we discover as we seek his truth throughout the universe, or, the earth, the laws of physics. Now we're discovering a system in the temple, the body, that works along with everything else he created. And I call that the Aleph Tav body system, because it has all the Hebrew letters from Aleph to Tav. Well, and other reasons. So, to make it simple, we basically break it down into three things. What is the Aleph Tav body system? If you can get this, you basically got most of the understanding to put things places, because we're really compartmentalized. So we kind of need to have an idea where to put information. And that's what's so difficult about Aleph Tav body. It's like, you need to know something about Hebrew, and you need to know something about the letters, and you need to know something about physics, and you need to know something about the body, and how do I describe one before I describe the other, but you need to know this to know that, and that to know this, and it's like, where do we start? So let's just give you some categories to stick things. You have energy points, energy cycles, and energy pathways. Those are three categories that everything in the Aleph Tav body can be grouped into. Very simple. And then it gets simplistically complicated. So energy cycles. There happens to be 7 cycles of the body that we can measure, which are based on levels of manifestation and families of similar frequency. It's the hardest thing to explain by far. We could describe cycles as categories. We could describe them as levels of depth. We could describe them as families of similar frequency. And in telecommunications, we could describe the cycles as modulators. Eventually, the cycles are what actually create the chakras. So the chakras really aren't what people think they are. Chakras are always found where the nerve plexuses are. There's 7 nerve plexuses on the spine. So, of course, those plexuses are very highly nerve-centered, and are going to produce a lot of energy. So that's where the chakras are usually located on the body. So the chakras are much different than what people think they are. They're just another manifestation of this really deep system. This is the deepest system in the body. All other energy systems that people talk about come out of these systems, and most of it has been corrupted. And they would love to corrupt this. And I'll show some demonstrations on where they have. The energy points. So there's 26 active energy points, 1 inactive point, very, very important. We're going to get to that. Each point has a Hebrew letter and shares a similar symbolic and numerical meaning of that Hebrew letter. They are telecommunication command centers, so they contain all the information for life to exist, including your DNA. Of course. How else would he have done it? And then you have pathways, and they can be broken down into 3 types. You have the primary pathway, which is literally the light and breath of life. You have the governing and supervising pathways, which are basically governing pathways. There's 3 of them. And then you have messenger pathways. So the primary pathway is one that splits into 2 that comes back together as one. Don't see that principle anywhere. And then you have the 3 governing pathways, and then you have the messenger pathways. And there's 12 of those. And they pretty much control more of the information through the organs. We'll get more into this. An overview real quick. So you have your 26 main points and 1 inactive. That's the command centers. You have your messenger pathways, which would be like the broadcasting channels. You have the governing pathways, which are your governing channels. You have the primary pathways, which is the breath of light and life. You have your 7 cycles, which are the cycle modulators. And all of this makes up the bioenergetic telecommunication centers of the body. So in essence, each command center contains the human code, you could say, and it broadcasts it through the body for proper functioning of all organs and systems. It even contains the information for the DNA. Think of it this way. There has to be a backup system in case the information gets corrupted. However, only when these points are resonating correctly in phase coherence and the pathways are circulating correctly can they recreate the proper chemistry, cells, and tissues. And I bet you can guess what messes them up. Life. Simply put. I'm trying to think where we want to go, because this can get somewhat detailed and I don't want to make it too complicated. Okay. All right, so there are 7 cycles of manifestation. Simply put, anything in the body that exists can be put into one of the 7 cycles. That's what that says. That's more simple. Before we get into this, we should get into something else, because we're going to get into some of the names. Yesterday, I left off with the word Shem. So everyone knows Shem is a Hebrew word for name. Hashem is the name. And I was talking about what is a name. And we give the acronym NICE. So N-I. Names are nice. So easy. N-I-C-E. I'm not going to write it all out. Nature, identity, character, essence. The nature, the identity, the character, and the essence. That is what a name is in Shem. And that is almost identical, or it is identical, to in physics what we call an energetic signature. And an energetic signature is like an energetic fingerprint to a substance. That energetic signature contains all of the frequencies and information that make up that substance. It also identifies one substance from another. So every substance on the face of the planet has its own energetic signature that is different than every other substance because it has different information. And we can measure that in frequencies or in wavelengths or however, there's different ways. So in some ways, we can have a mathematical numerical value for that energetic signature. And Hebrew is numbers. Therefore, a Hebrew name is an energetic signature, which contains the nature, identity, character, and essence of that substance, that person, that place, which is why he changes people's names. Because we have to change their nature, their identity, their character, and their essence. Okay, so when I first got into this and I started realizing these points, which have been taught for a very long time, were actually Hebrew letters, the first thing I had to do is try to figure out their names. Because if we could figure out the Shem of each point, we know the nature, identity, character, and essence of that point. So how we did that is I basically looked at the meaning of the letter, Aleph, and Aleph is number 1, so the meaning of number 1 and Aleph throughout the entire Bible, and you come up with a list of hundreds of different names or words that could describe the Aleph, and then we feed that through the body through biofeedback, which is very similar. I didn't explain this. That was in the other chat, the beach chat, if you were there. So how many people are familiar with a polygraph test, lie detector test? So what is it doing? Subconsciously, or maybe our spirit, they don't really know, ultimately knows truth and lie, right? It knows everything about your body. So they ask you a true and false question, and they get a reading on the chart as you answer. Muscle testing works the same way. So when you see someone doing muscle testing, and they stick their hand out and someone's pressing on their arm, and usually they're supposed to ask a true or false statement, not make true and false statements, not really ask a bunch of weird questions, but make a true and false statement about the body, or maybe they even have you hold something. Because if you remember yesterday, I was talking about how Dr. Vole found out that as soon as people picked up a supplement off his shelf, when he was taking the electrical readings of the body reading actually changed. Because as soon as we come in contact with any substance, this paper, the stand, another person, there's a communication taking place through the electromagnetic fields. And our body instantly knows if it's good or bad for us. This is how some people could just know this person isn't good, this person is good. Animals can pick up this stuff really easily because animals are much more sensitive to electromagnetic. And I mean, the more we study animals, we know this is how they communicate and how they do everything. We're kind of dumbed down because we're really into the physical mass, and we're just, we become isolated from this stuff and we suppress these things, so we are not sensitive to feeling them. But that's how that works. You make a true and false statement, and what happens? If it's false, the body sends out a negative signal. And if it's true, the body sends out a positive signal. I think. I'm not sure if the polarity is technically correct on a polygraph test, but anyway, it's measuring positive and negative, right? Well, usually when you make a lie or you make a statement that's not true, the body sends a negative signal throughout the body that weakens your muscles and you can't hold your hand up anymore. And if it's true, it sends out a positive message and you can keep your hand up. Same thing the polygraph test is testing. Same thing a biofeedback device is using. So we can output frequencies to the body and then measure the body's response and see if the body goes weak or strong, true or false. So we can be touching a point and sending a statement out. The name of this point is, whatever. Aleph, yes, no. Mover, yes, no, whatever. And it will go through all the different words until it finds what word is true about that point. And they're always consistent with everybody. The names are always the same on everybody because each point was named by the creator. And the same thing with the pathways. So your body knows everything going on. This is why muscle testing and biofeedback works. Your body has to know everything going on inside of it. Everything. If you got damaged by a vaccine 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, your body has a record of it, and it knows it. It knows everything going on in your body at every second. If it didn't, you'd be dead. So I like to use the example of blood chemistry. Your body is keeping your blood pH balanced every second of every day, and you don't know it, because if it didn't, you'd die. And if your blood chemistry starts losing its pH, it's either going to pull minerals or whatever it needs out of your tissues, your cells, your saliva, your urine, which is why people do pH tests to see how the urine and saliva are doing, because that's an indication of how much minerals the body's pulling out to balance your blood. So your body is doing millions of things every second, every day, and you don't even know it, just to keep you alive another 5 minutes. And it's prioritizing everything. What's the most important thing to just keep this person alive? And if it has to sacrifice something else, it will. So this is how the body really works. Tumors, cysts. Why do we make tumors and cysts? Because the body gets really toxic. The body knows it can't handle it. It can't get rid of it. It has to find a place to put it. So the body will make a tissue and then make a cyst or a tumor, a place to store the toxins until it's able to actually deal with it. This is how the body works. It's really smart. Yah knew what he was doing. And your body is always trying to keep you alive for the next 5 minutes. And if that means sacrificing some other less important part of the body, it will do it. So when we get into the names, that was important to know that the names actually have been tested according to the body to know what their real Shem is. So cycles. This is really fascinating. You could actually start with 7th cycle. 7th cycle is light that holds the body together. So now, who does the Bible say is the light of the world? Yeshua, who holds all things together. That's 7th cycle. 7th cycle is the light that holds us together. That's the Aleph Tav himself. And from there, it actually then turns into the 6th cycle. 6th cycle is spiritual. It's the spirit and the soul and the breath. And then just think in Hebrew, 7 is complete. 6 is the Vav, the 6th letter in the Hebrew alphabet. What does the Vav represent? It's the nail. It's the connector, the bridge, the mediator. 6 is the number of spiritual man. So technically he's our Vav. He's our Vav man. He's our connector. He's our mediator. So from the light is the breath of life, which makes up the spirit and soul of man. And then it breaks into 5 cycles that are purely physical. And I think 5 is the number of physical man. 5 is the number of grace. And what needs more grace than the flesh? The physical man. So all the points can be divided into these 6 cycles. All the pathways can get divided into these 6 cycles and different parts of the body. So earlier I mentioned depths. First would be like the superficial skin and lymph. This is the deep skin and the connective tissue. This is the blood and the liquids. This is the muscle. This is bone. So you can see how it's becoming more and more dense. Layers. The next layer is the spirit soul, and the next layer is the light. That's the cycles of manifestation of the body. That's how the body is created. And they don't always go in order. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They go in different orders at different times for different reasons. They're different perspectives giving you a different story of creation. And typically you see 2 different stories with cycles in the body. And one story is that the body just kind of existed and then it was all there. And the other story is how the body develops from an embryo. And it's like, well, that's interesting because Adam and Eve was just there and they're the only ones. And everyone after them developed from an embryo, which is kind of interesting that the same story is embedded in the body. There's the points you can't see, but collectively, they're called life formation messengers. And it's very interesting that in Hebrew, that word is malach, as in angels, messengers. And the other interesting thing is there are points that control descending energy and points that control ascending energy. Has to be a coincidence, because the New Agers made all this up. Oh, there it is in Hebrew. So if you can read modern or paleo, the life formation messengers. That's collectively, that's what all the points are called. And then each point, based on Hebrew letter, has its own specific name. So throughout history, they were numbered 1 through 26, actually 27. And the numbers are based on their operating frequencies. So a 1 is a 1, and a 2 is a 2, and a 3 is a 3. So it's very unique because you have 1s down here by the knees, and the 3s are up here on the back, and the 4s and the 5s are over here, and the 6s are here, and the 7s over here, and the 8s back over here. And it's very weird because in Chinese medicine, you have these things they call meridians, which just stem out of the system. And a meridian is a pathway. And then there's thousands of meridian points, by the way. And command centers, you only have 26. 27 really. I'll get to that. And so what they do is if they call it the large intestine pathway, which begins in your index finger, they just went straight up this pathway and went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Makes sense. That's what man does. Let's just number them. Or you look at these systems and you go, why aren't the numbers in order? Why didn't he go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Because they weren't made by man. They were only identified by man. And what they identified them by was their vibrational frequency. So a 1 is a 1 and a 2 is a 2. And eventually that's how I figured out they were Hebrew letters, besides the fact of understanding what each point controls. When you look at it, you go, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. Yeah, the aleph means the same thing. It's like, well, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Huh? Oh, you want to work too good now. Well, there's the primary pathway. Begins right here, basically. This is where it all comes back together. So it's 1. It makes a straight line down the front of the body and then back up the back and then back down the front of the body. And then it divides and comes down to the arm and makes a negative and comes back together. And then comes down to this leg and makes a negative and comes back together, and then goes in this arm and makes a positive and comes back together, and into this leg and makes a positive and comes back together. So this is where it all comes back together, right about where the umbilical cord is. Isn't that symbolic? So that's the primary pathway. And when it divides, it's called the breath of light and the breath of life, primary pathway. And then off of that, all the other pathways come, and I don't really, or divide off. I don't really have a diagram for that, but you have one that divides off and goes all the way down the right side of the body and the right arm, and down the left and the left arm. and then it divides again, and there's a pathway that zigzags back and forth. Then you get to the New Agers, and they want to call it the Kundalini spirit. And it's like, I'm sorry, but that's the breath of life. Nice try. And I'm sure you would love to replace that spirit with your spirit, but I don't think so. So what they're doing is they're taking these things and then corrupting them. And, if you want to invite a demonic spirit to take over one of these pathways, you can do it. You're not going to like it, but you can do it. And then you can rename it. And I don't think Yah likes that too much. But they definitely, the demonics, that's what I do. I just group them all together and call them the demonics. All the demonics, they know exactly how these systems work and how these points work, and they've been manipulating them for a long time, especially when you get in the SRA stuff. It's amazing what they're doing to these people. But they know exactly how to manipulate these pathways and these points. That's why they love the New Agers and they love them teaching all this nonsense, because they want access to these systems to interrupt the communication between you and the Creator and basically pervert it and bypass your connection to them. They know exactly what they're doing. So those three pathways I just explained are the three governing pathways. One goes straight down the middle, one goes on either side of the body, and one kind of goes back and forth. And these are the English name of the points. We had the Hebrew, and we also had the English translation. So it's actually called the life cycle governing pathway. That's the very first one. And then you have the life creation governing pathway. And then that breaks down into the breath and the blood governing pathway, which is a really interesting word when you get into the Hebrew, because that's like spirit, soul. And then they divide into the messenger pathways, which, as you could imagine, those ones are responsible for carrying the information from the life formation messengers throughout the body. And interesting enough, there's 4 sets of 3. 3 begin in the chest, ascending. 3 begin in the feet, ascending. 3 begin in the head, descending. And 3 begin in the face, and they're descending. What does that kind of make you think of?
Tribes.
The tribes. 12. Guess who the 13th tribe would be? Messenger pathways are very similar to meridians. That's in Chinese medicine, except they are much deeper. They're much less manifested. So from my understanding, they would be more like plasma, which is light and it's traveling through liquids and solid or gases, but plasma is neither liquid or gas. Did I say that right? Yeah, liquid or gas. I just said it backwards. Okay. Messenger pathways are broadcasting channels of the body, which carry the information from one energy point to another body or to another place in the body by a light. And then they begin to manifest, and they begin to make up other energy systems that are more physical, like liquid or solid, which we would call the meridians and the chakras and all these other systems. And eventually these pathways, along with the messenger points, the life formation messengers, combine to manifest all the parts of the body. Those are some of the names of the pathways, the 12. And then they're broken down by their cycles, 2 per cycle. They have some very interesting names. "26 life formation messengers. Each point acts as a command center and relates to a Hebrew letter and number. They are what contain the information and send it through the body. They are divided into the 7 life formation or cycles of life manifestation, mainly into the first 6. So, drawing time. How about blue? You might be aware that there's only 22 letters in Hebrew, but we have a problem because there's 26, actually 27 points. Anyone take a guess on how we solved that problem? Yeah, the 5 ending vowels. Now, some people say that that's not in the original Paleo. I disagree with this. I think this is another one of those, what was the word I used earlier? Witnesses. That, well, first, who changed the Hebrew? Who has the audacity to change the Hebrew letters? No. Daniel in Babylonian. So if you get Frank Seekin's book and you look at them, all the Paleo letters, yeah, the shape changed a little bit until you get to Daniel's time, and then they radically changed to what they call the Babylonian letters. Well, where was Daniel? In Babylon. And if you read Daniel, it's pretty clear that an angel came to him and said, take the book and put it into a code. What book? The Bible. How do you do that? You change the shape of the letters and thus you hide the true meaning. But Daniel was very wise. Maybe even smarter than Solomon. Solomon was supposed to be the wisest man, but he didn't end too well. Daniel ended very well. So if you take the ancient form of an aleph and the modern form of an aleph, one thing that became two, and you bring them back together, you probably have the full meaning of the letter. So I think both versions are valid. But Daniel's definitely the one who changed it until the end of the time. And it's very interesting, that word is ayin, dalet, ayin, tav. End of the time. Understand or see the door, you understand and see the covenant. Who's the door? If you understand the covenant, you understand the door. To understand the door, you understand the covenant. To understand the covenant, you understand the door. He hid something there. So we have to remember, are there things that are secret and mystical? Does the Bible teach that? Because I've heard people say that God doesn't hide anything. Well, I don't know what Bible they're reading. But let's correct that. What they're confused about is they say, well, God doesn't hide things from us. No, he hides things for you. Yes. When you buy a present for someone, what do you usually do? Why? Surprise. So it's a surprise. It's perfect wisdom and just like Yeshua being he knows exactly what he's doing. If I hide it in plain sight for you, that means the only way you're going to find it is if you look for it. And if you seek it, you're going to find it because it's hidden right here for you. But if you're not interested and you don't want to look for it, you're not going to find it. And when he came here, he spoke parables, and they asked him, why are you speaking these parables? He basically told you, I don't want everyone knowing. I only want those who want to know to come seek and find. It's the same thing. He doesn't hide it from us. He hides it for us to find it. And eventually, originally we had all kinds of information. And because of our disobedience, he hid it all. And now the time is up, and Ephraim is being restored, and he is revealing this all back. So, if you look at some of the final letters, the pictographic form of a nun can be like that. But I've seen it drawn like this. How do you not know that this is the final form? You can't. You can't say it is. You can't say it isn't. All you have to say is, it's possible. Let's just be honest. So I think the 5 final forms very much were a real thing. I mean, why would he make up new letters? And anyways, the 5 final forms are not actually new letters. They're just 5 of the 22 in a different form at the end of a letter. And that's where you get the 26. Now, only 26 points are active. 1 point's inactive, which is the final Zadi. So if you see, this is a modern form. What did I just do? I'm drawing a Z. So that's the modern form, if everyone can see that. That's what I keep hitting. I thought it was your leg. I'm like, I don't think I'm that close. So that's more of the modern form. But if you get the final Zati, it looks like this. This is the righteous man kneeling. See, this is his head. These are his arms. He's kneeling. This is a word, the Hebrew letter we get tzedakah, righteous. Well, if you ask the Jews or anyone else about the final form, what does it mean? They're going to say this is the resurrected righteous man with his hands raised. So wait a minute. We have a point on the body that's active for every Hebrew letter except for the letter that represents a resurrected righteous man. That's right. What do you think got turned off when Adam and Eve sinned? And if that point got turned back on, it would change the entire physics of our body. Yeah. I can guarantee only one person can turn it back on. Oh, they are trying. That's for sure. Where did I leave off? So obviously, seventh is the source, which we also call the light, which holds everything together. Yeshua, the Aleph Tav himself. I kind of already explained this. 6 is the spiritual man. 5 seems to be the physical man. Hebrew letters. This is really more into my other research on forming different things for the body as different applications, because right now the only application that has ever been around for thousands of years is hands-on touch. Because of the polarity difference in your hands, because of the primary pathway. One hand's negative, one hand's positive, so when you touch 2 different Hebrew letters on the body, you're basically kind of acting as jumper cables in one way. Not really, because, well, it's a whole nother topic. But you're using a positive, negative, and energy moves from negative to positive. So you actually get energy moving in the body just by touching. So I'm convinced that this is probably the original laying on of hands. And I think all the disciples may have known. I'm not sure. We do know that the Japanese say that this system was passed on all the way back from Moses. They say the ancient people knew it, and as far back that they could trace where it came to Japan was through Moses. And they say it was brought to Japan mainly by word of mouth through tribesmen. And it's like, what? What tribesmen? And then it was restored, and then it was brought to America, and the Jinsu people kind of renamed it. Although even that in Japanese, if you translate it to Hebrew, is really interesting. It's like the breath of life work. They completely New Aged it and just made up all that. They don't know any of this stuff. The New Age never know anything. You ask them something and they give you this weird pie in the sky answer, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Oh, it just sounds good. Okay. It's like Reiki. How many people have heard of Reiki? Reiki's a counterfeit. You ask them, what does the energy do? How does the energy move? We don't need to know. The energy knows what to do. Okay, I'm sorry, but there is like years and years of study of this to know how the circuits actually flow and what does what. But you're telling me you don't know how to do anything. You just know, you just put your hands on. They don't even put your hands on you. And they will tell you that they're channeling energy. So they have to go through this thing called this attunement, where someone else gives them the power. And then they are a conduit, and they basically transfer the universal life energy into you. And they have spirit guides and secret symbols. It's like, okay, is that enough warning signs? Yeah. The samurai and all that Japanese. So the next thing I was going to do is just give you some examples of some points. Now these are some actual real names of the points. The Aleph point is called the prime mover, and I should say up front, because I don't know if it's on here, the when I did the testing for this, we were testing the best names in Hebrew and the best names in English. So sometimes you'll see the Hebrew and the English, and you go, wait a minute, you know, there's a better translation in English for that Hebrew word you're using. That's like, yeah, I know, but this is the connotation that the body agreed was the best. Maybe it's, you know, so sometimes the connotation is slightly different, but when you put them both together, you get a better understanding of the word. So prime mover, the 12, which is the Lamed, is the will of authority. The mem point is called blood or liquid, it's dam mikvah. And the 9, which is the tet, is surrendered authority. And then I'm going to show you the 3rd cycle pathways. So that's the aleph. It's actually right inside your knee. Right where you bend, you will feel like a little indent. That's where the aleph point is. Rishon Bara is the name in Hebrew, which is like the prime creator. In English, it's the prime mover, because this point has to do with movement. And anything that has to do with the first thing being movement, which is really interesting, because if we go back to Genesis 2, what was the first thing he did? Moved. If you want to move and walk across the room, what's the first thing you have to do? Bend your knee. Coincidence, I'm sure. So these are all the different things. It's going to work. And you're going to see there's a lot of correlations to the meanings of the aleph. Knees have to be really strong, don't they? Because they have to basically carry you around and do everything. What's one of the meanings of the aleph? First, strong. An ox does a lot of work. How much work do our knees do? So all the principles of a ox or an aleph or the first. Who symbolizes the aleph? Or what does the aleph symbolize is a better way? Who? Yeah, someone said Elohim. If Elohim is the true aleph, what do we do in regard to him? Bend our knee. I could just be making this all up. The mem. This one has a lot of spiritual warfare. So if you look at the mem, what do you see? That's the ancient pictograph form. It means water, right? One of the meanings. Water, chaos, blessing, birthing. Doesn't it look like water? See the tidal wave? The mem. It kind of looks like a little womb. Because that's what mem's all about. Mem's is the best blessing and the curses, the chaos. But it's also the water. What can water do? Water can bring chaos and destroy, or water can renew. It's the point for birthing. So if you use mem as a prefix or a suffix in a word, it can mean what's birthed from or what comes from. We have a lot of M words that have to do with Marnox, mother. So mem is a picture of birthing, fertility. The birthing process, what is it? It's a lot of chaos. It comes through water, but then it gives you a blessing. So that's the principle of the mem.
Where is that?
Now on the body, that is, so all points are bilateral. So that means you have a point on either side. So if you half the body in half and then you half it again, so right above the nipple, about an inch, right about here, would be the mem. And if you look at the principles of the mem, fertility, pregnancy, menopause, menses, thyroid adrenals, this is endocrine glands, the thymus, multiple personality, SRA, DID. How many people are familiar with, not Tom Dunn, he's not here at this conference, L.A. Mazzulli. How many people have seen some of his PowerPoints? Have you seen the people who have been basically kidnapped and left, and then they examine the body, and there's a place on the body that has been cut off, but they don't know how they cut the thing off because it doesn't look like any surgical procedure that we're aware of was done. But there's a place on the body that's always missing. Right here. What do you think they're trying to tap into? This point controls all the information for reproduction. I think my time's almost up, but I'm going to wrap up real quick. I think I have 2 more slides. The lamed. So the lamed is right here on the side of the neck. Can you kind of see that one? So right below the ear, on the side of the neck. And the lamed is a shepherd's staff. It's the 12th letter in the Hebrew alphabet, so it has a lot to do with will and governance. 12 tribes, 12 disciples. So what does it control in the body? Dictatorial state of mind, stubbornness, willfulness. Has a lot to do with digestive, cervical 4, being a pain in the butt. Is a neck problem. I'm not joking. This is one of the main causes for sciatic. And it has to do with will. What does Yah call the people when their will is out of alignment with his? Stiff neck. Why? Because if this point gets congested, the energy comes up the back and goes through this point. If this point gets congested, it will stiffen your neck and upper back. So when you're out of will, with his will, your upper back and neck actually literally gets stiff. And if it affects the 4s, which are the doorway to the mind, it can create criminal behavior. And if it's really bad, too, it can affect the opposite 12, will affect the 9, which affects the same side leg, because since you're not in his will, you're a pain in the butt. So he's going to give you a pain in the butt. That is hard to see because it's right below the scapula, thank you. And so you come over just a little bit toward the spine. In between the spine and the scapula is the 9s. The tet. So in Hebrew, the tet is like a basket or like a snake or what you carry in a basket. And of course, the 9 has to do with what you're holding on to or not letting go of. So all these different, I mean, this is not an exhaustive list at all. Each one of these points control thousands of functions in the body. But they are directly related to how we live and obey all of his words. So how we live will affect these points, and then you get the corresponding results. So the blessing and the curses are built into the creation. He doesn't have to zap you with a lightning bolt. All you have to do is disobey what he said, and it's going to affect the letters that are related to what he said, which then naturally cause the body not to work. So corns, hammer toes, bunions, anything on the foot and the toes, that is a symbolic message to you that your body is not letting go of something, so then your body is going to grow an accumulation. Sinuses, not letting go. Here's some other big causes. Leukemia. Leukemia is completely related to not letting go. Lupus can be related to not letting go. Bad. All right, so this is third cycle, and I think this is my last thing. Just make sure. Yes. So third cycle has 2 pathways. One's called the blood messenger pathway, and one's called the head and vision messenger pathway. These are the things it's related to. But if you could see it, you would see that this pathway starts in the big toe, and this is coming up the back of the leg and then coming up the front of the leg. And it splits off and it comes down into the right thumb, and it goes up into the head, through the eyes, into the brain, and into the right earlobe. And the priest should take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest will put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the right thumb, and of the right big toe. We just happen to have a pathway that governs blood, liver, gallbladder, head. It goes through the heart, it goes through the head, it goes through the brain, your eyes. How many senses are there? And then there's these opposite things. The pathway actually vibrates as green, but it reflects the wavelength of red. So if you were to see it, it looks like red, but it actually vibrates as green. And if you look at your body, your blood kind of looks bluish green.
Yeah. It's blue inside. Yeah.
But if you get a cut, it's red because the light reflects off of it. And what do you see it as? Red. I could make this all up, maybe. So that is the Aleph Taw body system. and some examples. And as you can imagine, I'm trying to block this thing out. There's a lot more we could go into. I mean, we could go into hours to each point, obviously. And there's stuff I don't even know yet. And eventually, once we get the book out and we start training people on this, we're going to find out even more information. Because you could probably take Aleph Tav body to any other thing you've ever studied and find a correlation, because it's all the same thing. It's his language. This language is written on our bodies, and it governs the bodies. So I don't even know if we have time for questions. Do we have time for questions? Or